Under a crimson full moon, strange things begin to grow on the edges of a forgotten farmland. Among the rustling corn stalks, twisted fruits bear hauntingly human faces, whispering in voices only heard at night. What kind of experiment went wrong in this genetic farm? Why does the scarecrow only appear when the moon is full, and why is it moving? Scooby and the gang are about to find out. The van rumbled down a dirt road swallowed by tall crops on both sides. The GPS had given up miles ago, leaving Mystery Incorporated navigating by the rising moon and a creased brochure reading Granger Biotech Agricultural Research Facility, Feeding the Future. The words felt ironic now. Velma adjusted her glasses as they passed a rusted gate half hanging from its hinges. Something about this place felt genetically off. Like, did you guys hear that? Shaggy asked, peering nervously out the window. Fred slowed the van. Hear what? That. Shaggy insisted. It sounded like breathing. From the corn. The group fell silent. Outside, the wind brushed through the stalks, and for a moment, it really did sound like a deep inhale. Scooby-Doo whimpered and ducked behind the front seats, shaking like a leaf. I told you this was a bad idea, Daphne muttered, arms crossed. Why are we even here, Velma? Velma held up a flyer with a jagged tear through the top corner. A whistleblower sent this. Said the farm was growing something unnatural, something alive. We're talking genetically modified produce crossed with human DNA. He vanished last week. No one's heard from him since. Fred killed the engine. That's our cue. Let's split up and look around. But no wandering into the fields. We stick to the paths. The facility loomed ahead, half laboratory, half greenhouse, with glass walls fogged from within. Strange purple lights pulsed behind the glass like a heartbeat. As they stepped closer, a motion sensor buzzed and the doors creaked open on their own. Inside, rows of glowing plants pulsed under artificial sunlight. But it was what hung from the vines that froze them. Fruits. Giant ones. Peaches, tomatoes, strawberries, each disturbingly plump and shaped like distorted human faces. Eyes closed, mouth slightly parted, as if dreaming. Velma walked forward slowly, her voice hushed. This is CRISPR-level splicing. Some kind of chimeric growth experiment. Daphne gagged. They look like they're in pain. Suddenly, one of the fruits twitched. Its eyes flicked open. Scooby let out a yelp and sprinted for the door, dragging Shaggy with him. They tumbled into the dirt outside, scrambling backward as the wind picked up again. But it wasn't wind. The corn was moving, against the breeze, as if something was crawling between the stalks. A shape rose in the distance. Tall. Thin. With a burlap sack for a head and arms stretched like broken branches. The scarecrow. Ruro, Scooby squeaked. The scarecrow didn't walk, it hovered. Its cloak dragged along the soil like roots tearing from the ground. Shaggy grabbed Scooby's paw. Back to the van. I am not becoming corn chowder. Meanwhile, inside the lab, Velma was filming everything on her phone. This could prove everything, she whispered. But then she noticed something else. A nearby monitor showing real-time scans of brain activity. Not just in the fruits, but in the scarecrow itself. The scarecrow is linked, she gasped. It's a bioorganic defense system. Fred stepped beside her, pointing to a cluster of blinking red lights on the wall. Security system just activated. We're locked in. Back outside, Shaggy and Scooby slammed into the van, but the doors wouldn't open. They turned around slowly, realizing they weren't alone. Dozens of small fruits had rolled out of the cornfield behind them, twitching and murmuring. The sounds were low, melodic, like lullabies. Shaggy backed up against the van. Okay, just a dream, right? I had too many GMO burritos, and now I'm hallucinating, right? One fruit tilted toward him and whispered, "He watches when the moon is full." The scarecrow was closer now. Its face wasn't a mask. It was growing. Inside the lab, the lights went out. Velma's phone flickered. "Everyone stay calm," she whispered, voice tense. Then a whisper came through the intercom, "Welcome to the harvest." The lab was a tomb of flickering lights and humming machines. After the scarecrow's appearance, the team regrouped in a sealed control room, breaths shallow and eyes fixed on the black monitor screens. Velma sat at a terminal, fingers flying over the keyboard. "If I can get into the internal server, we might learn what they were trying to grow here." Fred stood at the door with a fire extinguisher gripped like a weapon. "We need a way out, Velma. Fast. The main doors are shut, and Scooby and Shaggy are out there with that thing." "I'm working on it," she muttered. "But someone encrypted these logs, deeply." Daphne hovered near the glass wall, where distorted shadows moved beyond the haze. "Why would anyone design a scarecrow that can move? Or, think?" Velma's screen lit up. "Got it. There's a folder labeled Project EDN Experimental DNA Enhancement Nexus." This wasn't just about modifying crops. They were trying to give plants a consciousness. A collective memory. Fred frowned. Why would anyone want a sentient cornfield? Velma turned the screen toward him. Because they believed plants could store human thoughts, memories, maybe even replicate identity. The faces on those fruits. They're grown from memory imprints. Fred stepped back. "You mean, those aren't random?" "More like organic recordings," Velma whispered. "This whole farm is one massive neural web." Cut to outside. Shaggy and Scooby were hiding in an abandoned greenhouse, its glass cracked and overgrown with vines. The fruits here were smaller, less developed, but even more grotesque. Some had multiple eyes. One wept a thick orange fluid. Scooby covered his snout. Rancid, Shaggy tried to bar the broken door with a rusty pipe. Okay, think, man, where do we go when we're being hunted by a monster made of hay and rage?" Scooby whimpered, pointing to a wall of hanging lab coats. Taped to one of them was a torn ID badge, Dr. Reed Halvorsen, Bioneural Division. Shaggy blinked. "That's the guy who sent the warning, right? The one who vanished." They rifled through the coat's pockets. Inside was a small flash drive and a folded page. It was a crude map of the farm, with 3 locations circled in red: main lab, root vault, and observation silo. Scrawled in shaky pen across the top, only one way to stop the cycle. Suddenly, a whisper came from behind the vines. "He watches. He grows. He remembers." The scarecrow's silhouette glided past the glass outside. Its head slowly turned, burlap stretching as if sniffing them out. Back in the control room, Velma examined a new video file recovered from the drive. It showed a camera feed from a test chamber. A woman in a lab coat held a peach with a newborn's face. She spoke directly to the camera. "This is subject 43C, cellular response is active. No rejection. Memory trace appears to match donor's last moments: fear, confusion, suffocation. We may have gone too far." The video glitched. Screams followed. The footage ended in static. Daphne stepped back, hand over her mouth. They weren't just growing food. They were harvesting souls. Fred moved to the wall panel. "We need to get to the observation silo." That was one of the locations on Halvorsen's map, right? Velma nodded. "If we can reach it, maybe we can find his core notes. Figure out how to stop this." Suddenly, a shriek echoed through the hallways. Not from an animal, but a fruit. One of the face fruits hanging from the ceiling split open, revealing pulsing vines inside. Velma grabbed her bag. "We move." Now. Outside, Scooby sniffed the air and whimpered. He's close. A long vine slithered across the ground behind them, wrapping slowly around Shaggy's ankle. He screamed, kicking it off, and they bolted from the greenhouse just as the scarecrow appeared at the far end, arms rising like twisted wings. Back inside, the group reached a stairwell that descended into darkness. Faint red lights pulsed from below. Fred led the way. Root vault. Just like the map said. Velma hesitated. It's underground. If they were storing DNA samples, they'd need it cooled. That's where the central system is. Daphne shined a flashlight ahead. Then let's go. Before we become next season's harvest. They descended into the vault, where strange glass tanks lined the walls, each one filled with plant matter, twisting roots that formed shapes resembling faces, hands, even limbs. Fred stared. They weren't just experimenting. They were preserving them. Velma approached the largest tank. Floating inside was a near-complete humanoid figure, its skin made of bark and its eyes wide open. It moved. Suddenly, the vault door slammed shut behind them. The vault was damp, humming with energy, and smelled like rusted metal and rotting vegetation. The walls were lined with biocontainers, most filled with twisted roots shaped into nightmarish effigies of humans, some whispering, others twitching silently. As the door slammed shut behind them, Fred ran back, trying to force it open, but it was sealed tight. Velma scanned the chamber. This isn't just a vault. It's an incubation lab. Daphne backed away from a tank where a pair of hands pressed against the glass from the inside. They're aware of us. Fred turned, tense. This was all hidden under the cornfield. Velma nodded slowly. What they did here, it wasn't just experimentation, it was replication. They weren't trying to evolve plants. They were trying to transfer consciousness into them. Fred frowned. Using what? DNA. More than that, Velma said, pulling out a journal from a shelf. Dar. Halvorson's field notes. He believed consciousness could be anchored into organic neural substrates using electrical memory pulses. They thought the root systems could hold a mind like a network. Daphne flipped through the notebook. These entries, they get erratic. Subjects screaming inside the soil, the scarecrow has bonded, fruit dreaming of death, what does that even mean? Scooby-Doo sniffed one of the containers. Roo-oh, suddenly, a voice echoed through the vault. Male, distorted, synthetic. You should not be here. They all froze. A light in the corner flickered on, revealing a mounted speaker. Velma approached cautiously. Dr. Halvorson. The voice responded, slower now. There is no Halvorson anymore. There is only the root. Then silence. Shaggy gulped. Dude, did he merge with the plants? Velma flipped a switch on the wall, revealing a hidden console. The screen blinked to life with a prompt, EDN core link, active. A map of the farm appeared, showing underground root pathways branching like a nervous system. At the center pulsed a red dot labeled memory stem node. This is it, she whispered. This is where it all connects. The original node. If we can sever it, we might disable the entire network. Daphne pointed at another mark. And the observation silo is right above that spot. Fred nodded. Then that's our next move. But first, we need out of this vault. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed above. Roots began to burst from the walls, slamming into metal, wrapping around tanks. One shattered, releasing a cloud of spores, and a humanoid root creature fell to the ground, groaning in agony. It opened its mouth and whispered, "Help, me." Velma's eyes widened. That's not a plant. That's a human trapped inside root tissue. Fred grabbed a metal rod, helping push back vines near the door. We need to cut power to this place. She raced to the side panel and yanked open a breaker box. "Cover me." The creature stumbled toward them. Its eyes flickered, flashes of memories. Children laughing. Fire. Screams. Velma hit the main breaker. Sparks flew, lights dimmed, and all root growth halted for a second. The vault door groaned. Fred forced it open. "Move." They ran into the corridor as the vault collapsed behind them. Scooby barked frantically, leading them through the narrow hallways to a stairwell spiraling upward. The silence was heavy now, too heavy. As they reached the upper level, the door creaked open into a massive dome filled with overgrown vines and rusted control panels. The observation silo. Daphne stepped into the overgrowth. "Is this where they monitored the entire experiment?" Velma turned on a side projector. A massive screen displayed old footage, scientists observing growing fruits, children walking through cornfields with sensors on their heads. They were using local families, Velma whispered, as memory donors. Some of them probably never left the farm. Fred pointed to a glowing chamber in the center. That must be the node. The memory stem node was a pulsating root bulb, protected by thick glass and glowing with internal energy. It throbbed like a living heart, with strange symbols etched around it. Velma stepped closer. "We destroy that, we break the network." But the screen behind them flickered. A new video played. Dr. Halvorsen stood in front of the silo's node, eyes wild. "This was never about food. We sought immortality. Mind without decay. Memory without death. The scarecrow, he's the prototype. He protects the harvest." Suddenly, the screen froze, and the silo began to shake. From the observation window, they saw it, emerging from the crops, 20 feet tall, with limbs made of braided corn stalks, a head aflame with orange plasma, and eyes glowing white. The scarecrow had grown. The observation silo shook violently, dust raining from above as the monstrous scarecrow lumbered closer, each step cracking the earth. Its eyes were pale orbs of light, staring through the observation glass like a god surveying insects. Fred grabbed Daphne's hand and pulled her back. "We're too exposed here." Velma scanned the room, frantic. "There's got to be a secondary exit, something that leads underground." Scooby growled toward the control panel. A blinking light read, "Emergency hatch, access tunnel 2B." She rushed over and pulled the lever. With a loud clank, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a rusted ladder descending into darkness. "There. Everyone down." Shaggy glanced at the shaking ceiling. Do we even know where that goes?" "Anywhere's better than here." Velma shouted. One by one, they descended into the tunnel just as the silo's wall exploded inwards. The scarecrow reached into the room with a hand of writhing corn stalks and dragged its flaming claws across the consoles, erasing decades of research in a hiss of smoke. Below, the group hit the dirt-covered floor of Tunnel 2B. The passage was narrow, thick with mildew and lined with torn cables and rotting posters from the 1970s. Faint words were visible on the paper, "The future of food starts here." Fred turned to Velma. "That thing, how is it alive? It's not just animated plant matter." Velma panted, wiping her glasses. "It's a vessel. A host." The scarecrow was the first successful transplant of neural consciousness into a plant-based construct. Halvorsen's consciousness, his mind, was transferred into it. Shaggy blinked. "So, Dr. Frankenstein turned himself into a veggie monster." "In a sense, yes," Velma nodded. "But he failed to maintain stability. The scarecrow's brain isn't functioning like ours, it's fragmented, looping memories, split identities." Daphne added, "It didn't attack us until we reached the memory node. It's protecting something." They pushed through the narrow corridor until they reached a broken chamber, lined with broken monitors and a series of jars labeled cognitive residue samples. Inside were preserved neural tissues, floating in a luminous green fluid. Velma examined one and gasped. These aren't just samples. They're people. All the test subjects, preserved. Their memories extracted and bottled. Fred stared at one jar. A child's voice echoed from it faintly, "I miss the sun," Scooby barked, then pawed at a nearby locker. Inside was a tattered lab coat with a name badge, Dr. G. Halvorsen, lead geneticist. In the pocket was an old cassette tape labeled, "Final Protocol." Velma inserted it into an old recorder. A gruff, broken voice began to play, "If you're hearing this, it means I've lost control. The Scarecrow Protocol was never supposed to awaken. The root systems absorbed too much consciousness. They don't forget. They dream. And in those dreams, they grow twisted. You must sever the central vein, the one under the chapel grove. Burn it. Purge the soil." Daphne blinked. Chapel Grove? I saw it on the farm map, an abandoned church surrounded by dead trees. Fred stood. "That's where we're headed." But as they turned to leave, a deafening screech echoed through the tunnels. Roots burst through the walls, slithering like serpents. From the end of the hallway, the Scarecrow's face emerged, split by a jagged grin of corn kernels and moss. "You stole the harvest," it growled in a voice half human, half earth. "Now you will feed it." The group bolted, pushing through a side passage as the Scarecrow clawed its way in. Shaggy tripped over a broken pipe and was nearly caught, but Scooby dragged him forward with desperate strength. They ducked into a crumbling elevator shaft, slamming the gate shut. Inside the elevator cage, Velma hit the emergency override. The lift lurched upward, creaking and grinding as it ascended toward the surface. The Scarecrow roared behind them, vines lashing the elevator, pulling it back, until the gears snapped and the cage shot up with violent force. They landed hard in a rusted storage shed near the main field. Outside, the sun had just set, and a full moon was rising. The air shimmered with spore clouds. The crops moved not with wind, but with intention. Velma looked out. "The network's awake. Everything is connected now." Fred pointed toward the distant grove, barely visible under the moonlight. "There's Chapel Grove. That's where this ends." But before they could move, Velma's voice trembled, "Guys, look." From the corn rows, dozens of figures emerged. Not the Scarecrow. Not fully human. They were half-grown hybrids, rooted humanoid forms, with fragments of memory burned into their movements. A woman brushing her hair with leaves. A boy holding a kite made of vines. A man endlessly knocking on an invisible door. "They're the failed transplants," Velma said, her voice hollow. "Living memories, trapped in cycles." The hybrids turned, sensing them, and began to walk toward them. Silent. Endless. From the distance, a scream rose, not of fear, but of rage. The Scarecrow had found them again. The moon hung like a lidless eye, casting silver light across the fields where the hybrids marched, slow but relentless. The gang fled across furrowed ground, each footfall squelching through genetically modified soil that writhed just beneath the surface. Every stalk of corn seemed to lean closer, listening. "They're surrounding us," Daphne shouted, breath ragged. Fred veered left toward a tractor path. "Head for the Chapel Grove. It's the only shot we've got." Behind them, the Scarecrow tore across the fields with inhuman speed. Its limbs twisted, stretching unnaturally, vines snapping forward to tear through trees and soil alike. The glow in its eyes flickered violently, less intelligence now, more instinct. The group reached the boundary of the grove, an ancient perimeter where even the corrupted plants refused to grow. Blackened trees arched above like dying fingers. In the center stood the chapel, a crumbling wooden structure overtaken by rot and moss. Its stained glass windows had long since shattered, replaced by boards etched with ritual markings and scientific formulas. Velma pushed through the heavy door, its hinges groaning. Inside, the air was thick with decay and mold. Candles, long extinguished, lined the altar, and strange vines grew upward from the floorboards, feeding on something deeper below. Shaggy gagged. Like. This place smells like a science fair exploded in a swamp. Velma's flashlight flicked across a torn tapestry. Symbols flickered, ancient runes interwoven with molecular structures. This wasn't just a church, she murmured. It was the core of the experiment. The grove is where the roots were seeded, literally and metaphorically. Fred examined the altar. Beneath it, a trapdoor. This has to be it. The central vein. Where everything began. He pried the hatch open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into the dark. As they moved down, the walls turned from wood to metal, from metal to root and flesh. Pipes pulsed like arteries. The smell of chlorophyll and iron became overpowering. They reached a chamber unlike anything above, the root heart. A cavern of bioluminescent fungi and pulsating root masses suspended in a pool of nutrient fluid. In the center was a glowing orb. A core of neural energy, beating like a heart, suspended by tendrils. Velma gasped. This is the central mind. The harvest memory. Everything, every failed experiment, every consciousness, feeds into this. A low vibration began to rise from the ground. The scarecrow was near. Fred raised a rusted axe he had taken from a tool rack above. We destroy this. We stop it. No. Velma shouted. We sever it cleanly. If we damage it without disrupting the network, the memories could scatter. Possess other systems, even us. Scooby whimpered and nudged a console on the wall. A screen lit up, showing ancient interface code and a blinking prompt, activate Final Purge protocol. Shaggy blinked. Final Purge. Like, total veggie genocide. Velma read the instructions. It'll isolate the harvest memory, contain it in a feedback loop, and collapse the root system from within. But it has to be done manually, someone has to stay here and trigger the final command. The silence thickened. Fred stepped forward. I'll do it. No, Daphne said softly, grabbing his arm. I've got field experience. I can time it and give you all the seconds to escape. Velma clenched her fists. No one stays. There has to be another way. A crash echoed above, the scarecrow had reached the chapel. Its steps thundered down the stairs. The root walls rippled, reacting to its presence. The orb began to pulse rapidly, and the memories in the chamber awakened. Faces formed in the vines. Faces of lost children, scientists, wanderers. They whispered in unison, "End us," tears welled in Velma's eyes. They're aware. They've been aware this whole time. Suddenly, Scooby leapt to the console and pressed the button with his paw. The system buzzed. Final purge sequence initiated. No. Velma screamed. Scooby, what are you doing? The dog turned and barked, nudging Shaggy toward the stairs. He's buying us time, Fred said. We have to go. Now. The group bolted up the stairs as the chamber began to quake. Below, the scarecrow burst into the root heart just as the chamber sealed behind them. Velma turned for one last look through a viewing pane. The scarecrow locked eyes with her, and for the first time, it bowed its head, as if surrendering. The purge began. The vines shrieked. Light poured from every root and crack. Above, the chapel erupted in green flame. The hybrids in the field stopped moving, paused mid-gesture. And slowly collapsed into the soil, returning to the earth. In the distance, silence. And from that silence, a howl. Scoobies. And then, nothing. The fire had long since died. The sun rose over Ashridge Valley, casting golden light upon scorched earth and silent fields. The once living corn now lay blackened and brittle, like burned skeletons of what once defied nature. What had taken generations of twisted science to grow was undone in one final scream beneath the soil. Velma sat in the tall grass, mud on her face, her glasses cracked. She hadn't spoken since dawn. Not since the purge. Not since Scooby vanished in the collapse. Her mind still echoed with the whispers of the harvest memory, fragments of thoughts not her own. Shaggy paced in a daze nearby. I should have pulled him back. He barked, he looked right at me, he knew. He chose. Fred stood quietly by the van, arms crossed, staring at the horizon. Daphne leaned against him, eyes red from crying but dry now. The four of them had survived. But not together. Not fully. Then, a sound. A crackling, like dry roots snapping in reverse. The ground trembled slightly. Fred grabbed his flashlight and turned toward the chapel ruins. Was that? Velma leapt up, sprinting across the field. Where the chapel once stood, only a crater remained, swallowed by collapsed tunnels and molten earth. But at the center, surrounded by charred vines, a figure lay curled in a shallow crater. Scooby, she whispered. The dog stirred. Shaggy screamed. Scooby-Doo. They ran together, falling into the pit with no regard for their injuries. The Great Dane was breathing, faint but steady. His fur was singed, and his collar was broken, but his eyes opened. Roo roast beef. Shaggy broke into hysterical laughter, hugging his friend. You're alive. You're alive, you magnificent mutt. Velma pressed a hand to Scooby's head, tears pouring freely now. You triggered the purge remotely, didn't you? You didn't stay behind, you found another way out. Scooby wagged his tail, weak but happy. Daphne smiled softly. You saved all of us. They carried him back to the van as the birds slowly returned to the sky. The valley no longer pulsed with the twisted hum of artificial life. The air felt still, too still. Velma, after treating Scooby's wounds, returned to the wreckage with a notebook in hand. She sifted through the remains, collecting shards of bark, scorched vines, melted tech. Her scientific mind refused to let go, not yet. Fred joined her. You're thinking about continuing it, aren't you? No, she said. I'm thinking about recording it, every detail. So no one ever makes the same mistake. He nodded, hand on her shoulder. That's what she would have wanted. Velma looked at him. Who? Dr. Martha Crane. Velma's eyes widened. How do you know that name? Fred handed her an old ID badge, warped from heat, but still legible. Found it under the van when we first arrived. I didn't want to believe she was involved. Velma turned the badge over. There was a message scratched into the back. We tried to harvest perfection. But what we grew, was guilt. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave the valley, Shaggy and Scooby sat beneath the twisted remains of a fruit tree. Think the corn'll stay dead? Shaggy asked, tossing a half-burnt cob aside. Scooby frowned. Rope so. They looked up. On one of the remaining branches hung a fruit. Pear-shaped, faintly pulsing, with the faint imprint of a smiling human face. They both screamed. We're moving to the city. The gang piled into the mystery machine. As the engine rumbled to life, Velma turned back one last time. The valley was quiet. The curse was buried. But some roots never die completely. The cursed harvest was finally laid to rest, but its eerie legacy lingered beneath the soil. The gang escaped the nightmare, their bond unbroken by fear or science. Though the fields fell silent, the whispers of the past warn that some roots never truly die. In the end, courage and friendship prove stronger than any experiment, yet the question remains: what else lies buried, waiting to grow again?